Hello Mech Warriors! Welcome back to the Mech Lab. Today we are going over some slightly more expensive tanks. On the last video many of you asked about VTOLs. This video is only about ground vehicles, my friends. VTOLs are their own beast. They will be getting their own video. Today we're looking at intro tech tanks that are mostly over 500 battle value. And we're starting off with the Edgar light hover tank. This is one of my favorite hover tank chassis in the game. Some people asked where it was in the last video. Well, I decided to save it for this one because my favorite version of this tank is the Edgar light hover tank with the fusion engine and the SRMs. This thing is super deadly. It's got great armor all around except for the rear, but you should be able to keep your rear faced away from enemies, hopefully, with this. With 11-17 movement, it's very quick, able to maintain 40 mm without even risking a piloting check to skid, and with a deadly array of weapons here, a medium laser and 2 SRM2s. It's not particularly hard hitting, but it's got great armor, it's going to survive for a long time, it's only 544 battle value, and it is insanely fast. Now, going down in the battle value scale, here we have the Flamer variant. Same armor, same speed, same fusion engine, but we have vehicle flamers instead. These require you to get into point-blank range, but they do a little bit of extra heat compared to a normal flamer. Pretty much everything that's great about the Edgar with the SRMs is great about this tank. Get behind your enemies and light them up with those flamers. Now, on the cheaper end, I would almost consider this a different tank, the Edgar Ice. Much slower, 812 hover speed, but only 433 battle value. It's 111 battle value less than the Edgar with the SRMs and the extra armor, but it does suffer. We've only got 10 on the rear, we've got 20 on the turret, which is still pretty respectable, 26 on the front as well, 16 on the sides. I mean, it can take a medium laser and a PPC, no problem like that, and it has the same armament as the Fusion Edgar, so it's got some punch. If you've got the extra, say, 150 battle value to pay for this, because you do want it probably at 4 piloting for those times when you do have to go fast, I would absolutely take this Edgar instead of this one. But if you're looking for something that's just very cheap and still relatively effective, the Edgar internal combustion engine is quite good. Next, we have a bit of a weird one. This is the Pack Rat. This is 500 battle value, 16 armor all around, no turret, 711 wheeled, and it carries 2 medium lasers and an SRM6. Probably worse than the Edgar in most situations, in my opinion. It does pack a lot more punch, but it is significantly slower and has a lot less armor. Again, if you've got the extra battle value, I would definitely upgrade this to a Edgar.
Nasty goblins is.
We've got the Goblin tank here. It's a little 45-tonner, it's got some decent armor on it, and it comes with various different armaments depending on what you need. It is a troop carrier, so we can haul some troops into battle with this. If you want the maximum amount of troops, then you definitely want the machine gun variant. Lots of machine guns on this thing, facing in all different directions. And we got 1 SRM in the turret with 2 tons of ammo so that it can fire off some infernos if it needs to. Great little anti-infantry vehicle here, and you can bring a bunch of infantry squads yourself, so you get the infantry advantage on the field overall. All the rest of these can only carry 1 ton of troops, but that's probably enough. For the LRM variant, these troops are most likely just there to discourage enemies from getting close, doing some nasty stuff like swarm attacks or leg attacks on enemy mechs. But with 20 LRMs in a turret, this is a pretty good long-range support unit. It's not super cheap, but it does have good armor overall. So if you're looking for something survivable that can defend itself at close range with a small extra investment of, say, 100 points into some troops, the LRM Goblin isn't bad. My favorite variant of the Goblin is the second most expensive triple SRM6 in the turret with 1 extra ton of ammo here, so you can take 3 tons of regular and 1 ton of infernos. Absolutely brutal close range firepower. I would probably take this over an LRM Carrier most of the time, just because it can actually survive to get close enough to use those SRMs. And perhaps the most traditional of the Goblins is the large laser variant. We've just got a single large laser in the turret. Decent mid-range firepower, carries a couple of troops. For 555 BV, this is not bad at all. These tanks got that dog in them. The Bulldog medium tank is pretty solid, 20 armor all around and 24 on the front. Bunch of strong weapons in a turret. We've got either 2 AC2s if you want a long-range pokey boy, or a large laser if you're looking for that more medium-range brawler type of unit. Either one has 2 SRM4s, and the AC2 variant has a little bit of extra close range protection with 1 additional machine gun. Both the Bulldog and the Goblin suffer from being a little slow with 4/6 movement. It's actually pretty easy to immobilize these tanks if you hit them in the sides by blowing off their tracks. I think I prefer the large laser variant. A nice big punchy weapon plus an extra ton of SRM ammo allows you to bring some Infernos for these, making them very flexible, although the battle value price tag on the AC2 variant is very cheap. Next we have the Tiger tank. This is a pretty interesting little intro-tech vehicle. We have an AC10 in the turret along with an SRM4 and a machine gun. 2 more machine guns, one in the front, one in the rear. 20 armor all around except for the rear, so it's a little bit less armored than the Bulldog, and packs just about as much punch for around the same battle value. With 2 tons of ammo in later eras, you can take precision ammo and make this into a real menace. I would say in earlier eras, the Bulldog with its extra armor and large laser probably has the edge. Next up, we'll look at the Hetszer. This is a very interesting vehicle. Wheeled means that it can't go through forests, which does limit its usefulness a little bit. The Hetszer is probably at its best when fighting in a city. It just wants to slowly roll up a street and ambush a mech, and then survive a couple of turns while getting off some shots. We have 5 SRM6s on this bad boy for 630 battle value. This is just a straight improvement on the classic SRM Carrier, in my opinion. It's not quite as terrifying, but it will actually survive a counterpunch and get a second volley. Then we have 2 different AC20 versions, and I'm gonna tell you that the Scout version is so much better, it's unbelievable. If you have the option to run it, you absolutely want the Scout wheeled assault gun, extra armor, and still has the AC20, paying much less battle value because it doesn't bring as much ammo. The only time you would need this much ammo in a Hetszer is if you are playing in later eras and you want to take all precision. And even with only 4 shots of precision, I think that the Hetszer Scout is probably still able to pull off what the Hetszer needs to do, which is get off a couple of AC20 shots before it gets destroyed. So the Hetszer Scout is definitely the better of the 2 in my opinion. Then we have the Laser Hetszer, which is even more heavily armored and carries 4 medium lasers, so same overall damage as the AC20, and the attacks are more averaged out. You're gonna get maybe 2 or 3 hits if you have decent numbers, rather than maybe getting 1 big hit. I think I'd probably bring the AC20 Scout version over this, even though it is 24 battle value cheaper. 4 medium lasers just doesn't really inspire terror in the way that you need it to, and the Hetzer's role is actually to serve as a cheap brick of armor that the enemy has to attack and get rid of, rather than something that does damage. It's just got that one big gun that really scares people into making them hit it. And then we have the AC10 version, which in my opinion is just absolutely terrible. Even though this is very heavily armored, it just carries so much ammo, it doesn't need nearly all of this. And it's not nearly as scary as the AC20 version, although it is still cheaper, which might serve your purposes very well. 26 armor on the sides and rear means that you need to put a significant amount of effort into killing this thing. Finally, we have the LRM Hetszer. This is a long-range support tank rather than a close-range juggernaut line breaker, and it's got plenty of ammo, 16 rounds for each of the LRM 15s. It can fire all game and has pretty good armor. If I wanted a decently well-armored LRM vehicle, I would probably go with LRM Scorpion Spam rather than this, but it does bring a lot more LRMs to the table per vehicle, which might tip it in the wheeled assault gun's favor. Okay, next we have the Saladin. This is a very interesting tank. I like the Saladin a lot. There's 2 versions of this. The other version doesn't have nearly as much armor. This is definitely the version that you want. The Saladin armor variant has 10 on every surface except for the front, which has 18, 812 movement speed. It can get that AC20 into combat very, very quickly at a pretty reasonable price point of 600 battle value. In later eras, when you can take precision ammo, this tank is absolutely disgusting. I brought this to a tournament. It always performed very well. It always died almost immediately, but it doesn't need to live very long when it only has 4 shots of precision ammo anyways. If it does manage to live after using all of its ammo, you can use it to charge someone. With its 35 tons of weight and reasonably fast speed, it will do a decent amount of charge damage. Alright, next we have the Partisan Heavy Tank. This is an assault tank This is an assault tank that you do not pay an assault price point for. We're looking at 580 or 673 respectively for a 3-5 tracked vehicle with a bunch of autocannons in a turret. I don't particularly like the Partisan heavy tank autocannon variants. They do pretty decent in their role. You give them 1 ton of flak ammo and they can shoot down flyers pretty well, but they're a little bit squishy to be getting this close. 12 range, you're gonna start getting into PPC range if you're that close. The AC2 variant has a lot more range, so it can stay back and stay fairly safe in the rear of your formation, but even with 5 of them, AC2s are still just kind of pitifully low on damage. However, on the other hand, we have the LRM variant. This is pretty expensive, 1021 battle value, but it's basically like a better LRM carrier. Both have 60 LRMs, but the Partisan has much more armor, meaning that it is much harder to kill. And it also has a turret, which allows it to fire in any direction that it wants. So even if enemies get into its side flank, it can still fire at them without moving, which is incredibly valuable. I will say the LRM Partisan tank is a little bit light on ammo. I've brought the Partisan LRM to games many times and it never disappoints. This is always a super deadly threat that your enemy has to deal with. Speaking of the LRM Carrier, let's have a look at it. 12 armor all around, very insufficient ammo overall, only 8 shots for each of the LRM 20s, and very slow, but pretty cheap. 833 battle value for 60 LRMs is about as cheap as it gets. This is a unit that does not have an eye on the long game. This is a unit that you bring in order to have it indirect fire and run out of ammo about halfway through the game. On the other hand, the primitive LRM Carrier is even cheaper, 686 battle value. It does have very flimsy armor. BAR 6 rating armor means that it is going to get blown up pretty much as soon as anything looks at it, even though it has 22. But 3 LRM 15s with plenty of ammo is not an insignificant threat. It can do the same job that the regular LRM Carrier does, probably a lot better, specifically because it has more ammo and is cheaper. The Videt medium tank is a tanker's tank. This is a 5.8 tracked vehicle with solid armor all around, 25 on the sides and turret, 33 on the front. Even the rear with 20 is very well armored. We have a single AC-10 with a single ton of ammo, and we have 1 machine gun in the front. This is a no-frills tank. It's pretty much if you put a Sherman into the Battletech universe. That's the Videt medium tank. At 650 battle value, it's very cheap, and it will be very effective. Able to maintain 3 TMM with its tracked movement of 5.8 and take a couple of real solid hits on its armor. There's a lot to like about the Videt medium tank. It will run out of ammo pretty soon, but 10 rounds of fire is plenty in my opinion. Let's go back to a couple of hover tanks, shall we? We've got the Planesman medium hover tank, 914 movement, 600 battle value, pretty reasonable. Decent armor all around, 18 on the front and turret, 60 on the sides, 12 on the rear. It can take a PPC shot and a medium laser pretty easily to any location. If it hits the rear, there's a pretty good chance it's going to blow up the magazine, so be careful about that. But we've got 2 SRM6s in a turret and an SRM2 in the front. I have no idea why they didn't just, but I'm not the designer. If it was me, I would have done 4 SRM4s instead of the 2 6s and the 2, but again, I'm not the designer. Plenty of ammo for all of these weapons. This tank is pretty decent if you just want something fairly cheap that's going to deliver SRMs into the enemy's face. But what if you want lasers instead of SRMs with perhaps some more armor? Well, we've got the Condor heavy hover tank, a 50-tonner, pretty tough to take down here. The Liao variant has 4 medium lasers in a turret and very beefy armor overall. My problem with hover tanks that have lots of armor is that you pay a premium for it because they are so fast, and they tend to get immobilized before they lose all of their armor from the sides and rear. So I'd probably only recommend investing in something this expensive in a hover tank if you're playing with vehicle effectiveness rules. Regardless, we have the Flamer variant. 1 less medium laser brings 2 vehicle flamers and 2 machine guns, as well as the same overall armor, but probably better spread out. We've got 25 on the turret and sides, and we've got 21 on the rear with 40 on the front. So we're more likely to lose the turret, but taking shots from the front will give better results overall. The two vehicle flamers are front and rear mounted, which is interesting. It can set some fires in front and behind itself and then drive away, providing some smoke cover perhaps for your forces. And the two machine guns allow it to deal with infantry as well, which is kind of nice. And overall, these changes make it a little bit cheaper. So the Liao version is quite good, and so is the Flamer variant. It just depends on what you want. Alright, next we have a very interesting and quite strange unit. We have the Drillson Heavy Hover Tank, 50 tonner, 914 movement, very quick, decent armor. I would love to see 20 on the sides and rear, but it's not 100% necessary. Like I said, it's probably going to get immobilized before it gets its armor stripped off. The SRM variant is just a crazy crit-seeking machine. We have many SRM2s with a large laser and a machine gun. Most of the weapons here are front-mounted, which means that you have to face your front directly towards the enemy, which slightly reduces flexibility, but we've got 3 tons of SRM ammo here, meaning that we can take Infernos with those SRM2s, no problem. Very nice for flexibility. The other variant is a little more expensive, 950 battle value, but it brings an LRM-10 instead of all of the SRMs. So we can fire off the LRM-10 and large laser together at long to medium range and be a bit more of a skirmisher unit. On something this fast, I usually prefer to have lots of close range firepower rather than some skirmishing ability, but being able to fight at medium range and use that mobility to your advantage to keep enemies far away and keep yourself relatively safe can be a good strategy as well. So both of these are pretty decent for what you get. Alright, now this might be my favorite vehicle on the list, and I'm talking about the ones that are not intro tech as well, just because I want to talk about them all at once. So the Zephr hover tank is technically the entry for this video, but we'll talk about its other versions as well. So the SRM2 one carries an SRM2 and a small laser in the rear, which is very strange, but it does allow you to fire at enemies while you're running away from them, which is pretty interesting. We have 3 medium lasers in a turret, as well as an SRM6 in the front, which can be given some lovely Infernos. So I really like the Zephr hover tank SRM2. Great armor overall, 24 on the sides, 37 on the front, and 29 on the turret. I mean, this thing is super tough. And with 914, it can maintain a high TMM, and it's under 900 battle value. I mean, this is a great deal overall. Now, there's 2 different Lost Tech versions. Both carry an ECM, which is great. Having a fast ECM that you can use to jam enemies is always solid. Still got the triple medium lasers in the turret. We have a tag on both of these as well for guiding in LRM fire, and an SRM6 in the front. On the OG, Zephr is pretty solid, good damage there, able to take Infernos, really cool. And then we've got a Narc version instead of the SRM6, able to buff your missiles, which might be really good alongside the tag. Like, you're gonna get either the tag or the Narc hitting so that you can guide in that indirect fire. Really solid overall, and only 811 battle value makes this an absolute steal. Next up, we have the Shrek. This is an interesting assault tank. We've got either the triple AC5 with a million machine guns variant, which is much better armored, definitely more so meant to be a close range fighter, despite the sniper tag, with a ludicrous amount of ammo, frankly. Or we've got the classic Shrek PPC carrier, 20 armor on the sides, 28 on the turret, and 24 on the front. This is a solid tank, able to dish out those 3 PPCs at that medium range. A little bit pricey, 935 battle value, but able to provide some good fire support. When you're taking a support unit, oftentimes for me it's between the Shrek and an Awesome, and you can take about 1.5 Shreks for the cost of an Awesome. Now these are going to attrition much worse, they're going to get killed much more quickly, and they can also get immobilized pretty easily. But the Awesome might get shot in the head and die, so consider that. Next, we have the Patton. This is kind of like the Videt's big brother. We've got an AC-10 and an LRM-5 in the turret, a rear-mounted flamer, and a front-mounted small laser. Insanely beefy, 50 armor on the front and 50 armor on the turret, 46 on the sides and 38 on the rear. This tank is going to take a lot of effort for enemies to get rid of it. It doesn't deal that much damage, but it is a solid armor brick. If you can drive it onto to an objective before it gets immobilized, it's going to sit there and be an annoyance that the enemy has to deal with. So for under 1,000 battle value, the patent tank is pretty solid. The Brutus Assault Tank. This is a true assault tank. This thing is super, super beefy. Even though it's only 75 tons, this is definitely the most assaulty of assault tanks that we have looked at so far. Let's start with the PPC-2, which is the cheapest of the bunch, with 979 battle value. The armor here suffers a little bit compared to its big brother, the PPC variant, but we have 2 large lasers and a PPC and 4 SRM2s front mounted, so this thing can deliver an extremely hard punch at medium and short range, and it still has enough armor that it's annoying to get rid of. Then we have the Brutus Assault Tank, the OG, same armor, still decently hard to take out, but with a bit more emphasis on that long range punch. We've got an LRM-20 in the turret along with the 2 large lasers, able to defend itself at all ranges and contribute at all ranges. Plenty of ammo for the LRM-20. It can fire all game long, no problems at all, and it has a little bit more SRM punch overall than the PPC-2, so it's even more dangerous at close range if you don't include the long range weapons in that. Then finally we have the Brutus PPC, still has those twin SRM-6s, still has an SRM-2 in the front. 2 PPCs is all it brings to the table. This is a unit that you could take instead of a Shrek PPC carrier, and it would work pretty well. Instead of being a cheap PPC unit, this is an armor brick that has good ranged pressure that it can bring, forcing enemies to get closer and get into range of those SRMs. With a mountain of over 200 armor, this is a unit that is extremely difficult to take down. I personally probably wouldn't bring something this expensive in a tank unless I was okay with it getting immobilized, because it can stay and defend my point or something in an objective, but I mean, you can't really argue with 57 armor in the front. That's crazy. Next, one of the craziest tanks I have ever seen, the Antos. I would definitely recommend the ICE version. It's reasonably well armored for a cheap price point. We've got 938 battle value, 28 in the front and turret, 24 on the sides and rear. 10 internal structure means that it's pretty darn tough. The 2 LRM-5s are kind of just incidental here. What we're really caring about is the ridiculous 8 medium lasers that it carries in the turret. This is going to drive up to you and just blow you up with so many lasers. This has the same firepower as a Hunchback 4P, with arguably about as much durability. It is a bit slower, but it's also got a couple of LRM-5s to ping with at long range. Now, upgrading to the Fusion variant, we have much more armor, 35 on the sides, 40 on the turret and the front. So this is an extremely hard vehicle to take down, and it has 10 medium lasers. This is disgusting. It will absolutely rip you apart at close range, and it still has a decent punch with 2 LRM-10s at long range. Next, we have the Stormfur, which follows pretty much the same doctrine. We have a bunch of close-range weapons with a little bit of long-range punch, 1 LRM-20 on the SRM variant with 4 SRM-4s, and instead of taking weapons, this tank mostly just focuses on taking a ludicrous amount of armor. 66 armor all around, except for the rear, which is 48. I mean, this is going to take forever for your enemies to kill, unless they get lucky and hit the magazine. The regular Stormfur tank just has 2 LRM-20s, so it is exclusively a long-range support unit, but unlike a lot of other long-range support tanks with LRMs on them, your enemy's probably just going to ignore this one, and they would be smart to do so because it's going to run out of ammo pretty darn quickly. Paying for this much armor is just kind of ludicrous, honestly. This is harder to take down than an Atlas, arguably, unless you get behind it and hit the magazine. Next, we have a very nicely balanced wheeled vehicle that is meant to bring troops into battle. 5 tons of troop capacity. You can fit a lot of infantry into the Turhan. Now, it is a little bit slow, 4-6, and I don't like wheeled movement. It's a little bit too easy to immobilize the tank, but for 640 battle value, you get 2 large lasers and 2 machine guns. That's pretty solid overall, and it's pretty well armored. It's not going to die easily. I would love to see this tank be a little bit faster. That's the only thing that I really have a problem with. Finally, we have probably my favorite all-rounder tank. This is a unit that can do pretty much much everything. The Manticor is really well armored. 42 on the front and turret, 33 on the sides, 26 on the rear. No area of this tank is particularly vulnerable. It has long-range punch. We've got an LRM 10 and a PPC. Great long-range damage. We have an SRM 6 and a medium laser for close-range damage. It's 4/6, so it's not super slow, and you're not paying the extra battle value for the 5/8 movement. Most of the weapons are turret-mounted, meaning that you don't care if it gets immobilized particularly very much. So the Manticor, if you just want a solid all-rounder tank, is among the best in the game for its battle value cost, in my opinion. Are there any tanks that I missed that you think definitely should be on this list? Remember, it's intro tech. Leave your recommendations in the comments. Remember to like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Really helps out the channel a lot. Thanks for watching, Mech Warriors, and have a great day.